Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to my podcast. My name is Lynette. And not the last episode, but the one before that, we talked a little bit about wandering through the desert when you go through those dry periods in your life. And what that means is there's about to be a shift in your life. I know it's hard and lonely when you go through that quiet, dry period, but I think it's necessary because that is what makes you listen, really press in. That is when God can communicate with you and let you know what your next chapter is for your life. I'm going to share a little bit more about my dry period with you. It was before the pandemic. It was when I was not feeling good in a sense that it affected my mobility. And so there were approximately 5 questions that I had on my mind that I really needed an answer to, because prior to having mobility problems, I was on the go all the time. I don't know if I was running from my own thoughts, chasing my own tail, or really and truly trying to make my life better. But whatever it was, it obviously wasn't working for me because somehow stress entered in. And I firmly believe stress is a root of most diseases and illnesses. That's my own thought. You can agree or disagree. But I think no matter how well you eat, no matter how much you exercise, if you don't eliminate stress, I think it's a more difficult task. In fact, personally, I think eliminating the stress and getting your own mind, your own thoughts in a good place is actually more important than the 2 things that I had mentioned. These 5 things that I mentioned are actually the first 5 episodes of this podcast, because when life changed for me drastically and I fell to my knees, I had nowhere to go, couldn't run for myself, couldn't go anywhere. I was stuck at home. I didn't have the legs to take me or to drive me or whatever. And so that was a very interesting position to be in. However, a friend of mine suggested I do a podcast. So not really knowing what a podcast was, I looked it up, and one thing led to the other, but I realized I really had a story to tell because of my journey. What I've had to go through to get to this point was hopefully in place to save a few steps for others that may be going through a similar situation. But in being totally candid with you, totally open, I started out with each episode, I wrote down what those 5 questions were that I had on my mind. For example, the one you heard last episode was, you can glance but don't stare. That had to do with the past. And then I made one about priorities, because I was always taught that if you put yourself first, you're being selfish. And that didn't quite feel right. And I do believe that's an old cliche. I don't mean neglect people that depend on you. But what I mean is you owe it to yourself and to those around you to make yourself the best that you can be. And I think you're there more fully for them when you do this. But it is important to do so. So that was an episode. Regardless, when I made those episodes, it was almost like I had gone to the best therapist in the world. I didn't plan on this happening, and this certainly is not why I started this podcast. But I noticed I was feeling better and better and better. And so these things were obviously putting a lot of stress on me. They were weighing me down. And this is kind of how I released it. Without realizing that's what I was doing, I just wanted to share the journey that I had gone on, that I was going through. So as I went on, the first 5 episodes are mainly about the real situations at hand that I was going through. But I noticed I was feeling better and better. For me, it was a great release in doing this and putting it into words. And as I sit here talking, I actually feel like I'm talking to people, either individuals or a group, because I know eventually that's the ears that it will fall on. But also what it made me do was pretty much dissect the problem. And if you've noticed, whether you've gone to therapy or not, the therapist more or less just sits there. They don't really say anything. And as you talk, you kind of have your own revelations. You kind of like figure things out on your own. And I think doing this podcast, putting those questions out, certainly helped me. So I can't help but to think, if you have something that's weighing you down, something that's interfering with your health, get them out of you. Lay them on the table in whichever way that you feel you can do it, whether it's just writing them down. They say burn the paper afterwards or throw it away. I really don't know what's the right way to do that. But it's important in some way to release it. And even if it's talking to people in hopes that your journey will help others. And in doing so, it helps to release that stress. I think I mentioned earlier that I was praying about what I need to do to walk again. And the answer I got was release all stress. In other words, be in a good frame of mind. And it's interesting because I feel like I got a confirmation because I always kind of felt that. It's like, in so many areas it applies to. For example, I always think, I should eat right, or I should quit having my Starbucks or whatever. And then when I do, I get a different kind of stress because I feel deprived. Now, I'm not saying go out and eat a dozen donuts by any means, but I think everything in balance. I think you still need to make yourself happy. And if there's a situation stuck in you that is making you unhappy, get it out. Get it out in any way that you know how. Get it out in writing, get it out in broadcasting it, talking to a friend. One thing that I now do, I want to share this with you. When I lay in bed at night and I have something on my mind, and I ask God, do you have anything that you would like to say to me? And the answers that I get are unbelievable. For example, if something is upsetting me and I think of how to handle it, either this situation, that situation, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. I have my own game plan. And then in the spirit, in God's spirit, I get an answer, and it's something that I never even thought of, never even thought about doing. And I notice it releases so much. So as time goes on and you do that, pretty soon it's like you don't want to bring everything that bothers you to the table at once. But if you kind of dissect it piece by piece and bring it to God, quiet your mind and ask Him if He has anything that He wants to say to you, you will be surprised at the answers you get. And they're generally answers that, as I said, you never thought of. We all have our own ideas of how we're going to handle something and what we're going to do. But when you trust and you believe and you get the answer, you know without a doubt that it's the right way. And as for me, the experience was, as time went on, getting this information from God and releasing what I felt was blocking me, I could feel a subtle shift in myself. I could feel a change. And the things that either used to bother me didn't bother me anymore, or I looked at them differently. In fact, a friend came over and she said, "You've changed, haven't you?" And I can't remember if I nodded or said yeah or whatever. but I knew exactly what she meant. And I thought that was very perceptive of her to say that. I didn't acknowledge it too much, but I knew what she was talking about. And now I noticed certain people will try to do or say things that they used to do and say to try to manipulate me. We all have people that try to manipulate you. And I noticed, and they noticed, it's not happening anymore. So when you get to that place where it becomes natural, because you're not afraid of a loss, you're not afraid of losing those people. You know the people that love you and care for you and care about you are going to be there for you. You know that you're taking the right steps. You know that the next chapter of your life is going to happen and it's going to be better. So these people can no longer manipulate you, making you feel like you're going to have a loss, that your life is going to be less than, because you know it's not. You know it's going to be better than, with or without them. So they can try to manipulate you or use you or whatever it is that certain individuals do. It seems interesting that the longer you've known people, those are the ones that are the worst critics in terms of trying to get you to do what they want you to do. But as I said, and this is firm and without a shadow of a doubt, it ain't gonna happen anymore. And I think they see that. I think they realize that. And pretty soon they back off. It's almost like a predator who tries and tries to get what they can. But when they finally see that they can't, then they come around in a different light for a different reason. Because when you're getting your information, you don't have a question if you're making the right decision or not. You're getting it directly from the source. And when you are grounded and get it directly from the source, you develop a certain type of confidence, a confidence that nobody else can shake. People try, in fact, they will try, and it's exhausting. You have to work so hard to get certain people to back off and gain the respect that you deserve. And they will try to manipulate you, but what is so sad about that? It means they haven't grown, that they are still stuck in that way, that old time. And so just shake it off your feet and walk on. Because when you have God giving you direct advice, direct ways to handle things, you know without a shadow of a doubt that you're doing the right thing. So this jibber jabber that people try to put in your ear, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, who you should do it with, blah, 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 it doesn't matter anymore, because you can just smile and nod and you feel okay because you have that confidence in knowing that you've made the right decision, because you were getting your directions from the highest authority. Just think, the very highest authority. What kind of confidence does that give you to know that the information that you're getting is from the highest source ever, above all, above any mankind? So as I said in 2 episodes ago, as you're going through this dry period, you are making a shift. And that's when you should really press in and get your information, your direction from the highest source. And even though at times you're going to feel lonely, because sometimes it's not fun going through things alone, but I know I've mentioned this earlier, it is time to get excited. It is time to know that there is a change taking place. And I'm not even sure if everybody has changes, or if it's a matter of you were chosen to take this step, to have this new chapter and be ready for that shift, for that new direction, for the new you. And it is so exciting. It really is exciting. And as I said, I'm not saying that God put this illness on me. But if it hadn't happened, I really doubt that I would be where I am today. I really doubt that I would be this far in terms of developing a confidence, a knowing, a trust, knowing that I'm making the right decisions. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I make all the right decisions by any means. We're all human beings. But even though this hasn't always been a fun journey, and in some cases it's brought the worst out in me, but in many more cases, I think it brought the best out in me. And I think it's made me a better person. And I believe that you too will have the same experience. I believe there's a reason that we're brought together. And as I mentioned before, the whole reason for this podcast is to hopefully make it a little bit easier on someone that's going through the same journey, but also in life. If we share our experiences with each other, we just humble ourselves and say, yes, I'm going through this. I think we can make the steps of our brothers and sisters a little less. But the good news is, and the big picture is, when you are going through a time that's tough, a time where you feel alone, it is time to get excited. And that's probably a hard thing to swallow, but it means there's a shift and somebody cares enough about you to make that shift, to make that change, to bring you to your next chapter, to give you that confidence. So be excited for that. Be excited that you're an individual that's life is going to shift, that you're going to take a step above and be better than you ever thought you could be in many ways. And by better, I mean the confidence, the faith, the trusting, the not worrying about so many things, just being more present, being in the moment. Those are all things that we strive for, but they're not always easy to get. But when you're going through this dry period, when you're going through this walk in the desert, through this lonely period, just know you're going through it for a reason, and that reason is so you can develop all these things, and all these things make life so much better. But the interesting thing is no matter what I'm going through physically, I can honestly say, hands down, is I have never been happier. And I think the reason for that is because happiness comes from having a peace of mind, health and happiness. That's what it's all about. Those are the things we want for ourselves, the people we love. But it is a building process, and it happens step by step. So when we start small and we develop one thing at a time, one change at a time, we walk in that for a little bit till it becomes part of us, part of who we are. And again, it's a step-by-step process, and you need to walk in them for a little while for them to become a part of who you are. It's funny because when things happen to us, we tend to think of ourselves as the victim, but in reality, we're not the victim. It is an opportunity to change or be changed. We can be open to the change or we can resist it. And after these changes are made and become solid in the foundation of who you are, when you come out on the other side and you've developed as an individual, the very things that made you feel lonely, that you were dissatisfied about, they may not even be significant to you any longer. And that, my friend, is growing. God bless you. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.